Have you ever wondered where the black gold that powers our world actually comes from? And I don't mean deep underground, I mean, how did we first figure out how to get it and use it? The story of oil is much older and stranger than you might think, and it starts long before the first car ever hit the road. Let's journey back in time. Believe it or not, our relationship with oil began thousands of years ago. Ancient civilizations like the Babylonians and Sumerians weren't drilling for it, but they found it seeping naturally to the surface in pits and pools. They called it bitumen or asphalt. So what did they do with this sticky, black goo? Well, they were incredibly resourceful. They used it as a waterproof sealant for their boats, baskets, and even buildings. The famous walls of Babylon were held together with a mortar made from bitumen. They also used it for medicine, believing it could treat everything from skin ailments to indigestion. And in warfare, it was a key ingredient in fearsome flaming arrows and other incendiary weapons. It was nature's multi-tool, just waiting to be discovered. For centuries, this was the primary way oil was collected, by skimming it from the surface of water or digging shallow pits where it seeped up. In ancient China, they took it a step further. As early as the 4th century, they developed a clever technique using bamboo poles to drill shallow wells, sometimes hundreds of feet deep. They were primarily looking for salt water to make salt, but they often found natural gas and oil along the way. They ingeniously used the natural gas, transported through bamboo pipelines, to heat the salt water and evaporate it, leaving the salt behind. It was a primitive but effective integrated energy system. In other parts of the world, like medieval Europe and the Middle East, oil was collected and distilled for use in lamps. It was a messy, smoky business, but it provided a source of light after dark. In Baku, now the capital of Azerbaijan, oil pits were a common sight for centuries, with locals collecting the crude to sell for lighting and medicinal purposes. Marco Polo himself even described these bubbling oil springs in his travels. People knew this substance was valuable, but the scale was tiny. It was all about what you could scoop up by hand. The real game changer came with the quest for better lighting. By the mid-19th century, the demand for lamp fuel was soaring. Whale oil, the premium fuel of the day, was becoming incredibly expensive and scarce as whale populations declined. People needed a cheaper, more reliable alternative. Kerosene, a clean-burning fuel that could be distilled from crude oil, was the answer. A Canadian chemist named Abraham Gessner perfected the process in the 1840s, and suddenly, the sticky black goo from the ground had a massive new market. The only problem was supply. Skimming oil from ponds just wasn't going to cut it. This brings us to a man named Edwin Drake. In 1859, a group of investors sent Drake to a small town in Pennsylvania called Titusville, where oil seeps were common. Their idea was to drill for oil, just like people drilled for water or salt. At the time, this was a radical concept. Locals called him Crazy Drake and laughed at his efforts. His drilling was slow, plagued by collapsing holes and equipment failures. For weeks, he hit nothing but rock. His investors gave up on him, and he had to fund the last bit of the project with his own money. Then, on a quiet Saturday in August 1859, at a depth of just 69.5 feet, his drill bit slipped into a crevice. The next day, his team found the well pipe filled with crude oil. They had struck it rich. Drake's well wasn't the first oil well ever drilled, but it was the first one drilled specifically to find and extract oil in large quantities. It kicked off the first great American oil boom. The news spread like wildfire. Prospectors, speculators, and workers flooded into western Pennsylvania, creating chaotic boomtowns overnight. The landscape was transformed, covered with thousands of wooden derricks. This was the birth of the modern petroleum industry. The technology was simple, at first steam-powered engines, wooden derricks, and basic drilling tools. But the principle was established. You could drill deep into the earth and unlock vast reservoirs of energy. The initial impact was all about kerosene for lighting. It made nights brighter and safer for millions of people, replacing smelly, expensive alternatives. But another invention was just around the corner that would change everything once again: the internal combustion engine. When Carl Benz and Gottlieb Daimler introduced their first gasoline-powered automobiles in the 1880s, gasoline was little more than a smelly, flammable byproduct of kerosene refining. In fact, it was often just dumped into rivers because no one knew what to do with it. But for the new horseless carriages, it was the perfect fuel. As cars became more popular, the demand for gasoline skyrocketed. The oil industry, which was built on lighting the world, now had a new and even bigger mission: to move the world. This shift triggered a new wave of innovation. Drillers had to go deeper and faster. Rotary drilling, which used a rotating drill bit to pulverize rock, replaced the old cable tool method of just pounding the ground. This allowed for much deeper wells and access to oil fields that were previously unreachable. Prospectors began using geology and seismology to find oil, moving from luck-based wildcatting to a more scientific approach. The discovery of massive oil fields like Spindletop in Texas in 1901 was a turning point. The Spindletop gusher blew for 9 days, shooting oil over 150 feet into the air and producing an estimated 100,000 barrels a day. This single discovery produced more oil in one day than the rest of the world's oil fields combined. It heralded the age of cheap, abundant fuel, and cemented the rise of oil giants like Texaco and Gulf Oil. From the sticky substance used to waterproof ancient boats, to the fuel that lit up the 19th century, and finally, to the energy source that powered the 20th century's industrial and transportation revolutions, oil's journey is a story of human ingenuity, desperation, and discovery. It shows how a single resource can shape civilizations and change the course of history. The methods have evolved from hand-dug pits to sophisticated deep-sea rigs. But the fundamental quest remains the same, to unlock the energy hidden deep within our planet. Thanks for watching this journey through the history of oil.